Today I'm working off a sketch to produce this painting. Hi everyone, Steve Elliott here again. I'm doing a lot of walking recently and loving this time of year. It's autumn, there's lots of golden and yellow colours out there, and I've been doing a bit of sketching. I sketched this bridle path a few days ago. This was drawn on my Samsung Galaxy Note 8. It's quite cold. I stood there sketching away on this tiny little screen. Well, it's not so tiny actually, because it's a Note 8 and they are quite big. But it's still, way tiny compared to a sketchbook. And I thought it would be nice to turn that sketch into a painting. This is how I used to work all the time. I never used to use photos. I always worked off sketches. And I thought it'd be cool to do a watercolour sketch, and I'm doing this because it's only going to take, the actual completed painting only took about 20 minutes. I'm lying actually. This painting only took about 20 minutes. I did two previous to this, which took nearly a day, which I scrapped. And that was due, my head's not been right recently. If you know, my dad's taken ill and I'm sort of worried about him and looking after him. So, first of all, thanks everybody for all the messages saying hope he gets well soon. It's appreciated, sort of keeps me going. And I've kind of got my act back together now. And I thought this morning, I'm going to have a go at this. I've had two real bad fails with it. And it's another day. So let's see if I can come up with something fast and loose. So this is a sort of a wet in wet technique. I'm using my brushes, which you can download for free if you haven't already got them. They're available on my website. I'll put the link in the description below if you haven't already got those. I would imagine most people have got them by now. But anyway, I start off by loading in a textured paper for the paper, put that on the top layer and create that, or set that to multiply so that it all the colours that are underneath it show through. And then I create another layer and I put on the first initial wash of colours, which you can see sort of on the underlying painting. Then nearly every other layer after that I created as a multiply layer, because I thought when you're doing watercolours, in effect they are translucent and they let the colours below glow through, so they're not opaque at all. So I thought, I don't normally do this, but I thought I'd try it, because by setting it to multiply you are getting a very similar effect to what you would get with watercolour. And what I mean, why I'm not using add, for example, if you put a yellow on a watercolour, not a gouache, but just a watercolour colour, yellow, on a brown, it would stay brown. You wouldn't see the yellow. It might tint it very slightly. So that's why the kind of multiply layer effect works really well for this. So I did actually paint every layer as a multiply layer, except for one layer, which I set to normal, and that was when I was doing the leaves at the end. And I guess that was like using a gouache for the painting. But anyway, I did this nearly all with the wet in wet brushes for putting on the washes, because I wanted to keep it really loose and wet looking. And I used the rigger a lot as well. So there was kind of the main brushes that I use. I can't remember what I was using where for most of the time, but you can slow the video down and obviously see them, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I'm not using the rigger for this bit. I'm still using the wet in wet glazing brush, and I've just changed the size and the opacity slightly. And I'm just sort of getting in these really diffused colours. It was a cold morning. The sun wasn't shining. It was very grey, dull, and chilled to the bone type of a day. And I wanted to kind of get that into the painting. So this hasn't got the bright yellows and oranges and the light and shade that I've been doing recently when I've been going out on a sunny morning. So I'm using sort of browns and purples, I guess, to get the effect I want of this sort of frosty morning. There was a frost on the ground. And this is the one where I took a wrong turn. Well, I didn't take a wrong turn. I was forced to, because the actual bridle path I wanted to go up to was closed. I had to walk down another one, and it took me like 3 miles out of my way. So I had quite a long walk that morning. But it was great because, you know, you get lots of material to paint with. So you can see I'm picking the colours off the colour wheel rather than off the palette. The palette is the one that I created for David Hockney. And I was going to use that, and I did try that for the first painting I did. And both times I made a real bad mistake. And the mistake was that I made the trees that, the mid-ground trees, with the big tall trees, I made the leaves on them far too dark, and all the surrounding bushes way too dark. So when I put the foreground bush in, it looked very, very flat, and I got too much colour in there, and it just looked a complete mess. So I scrapped that. I thought I did think about showing you so you can see how, you know, it's easy to crash and burn, but I was just so embarrassed. I thought, no, I'm not even gonna go there. And I wanted something that was obviously done really quick and with very few brush strokes and not overworked. So I wanted to keep it really, really fresh and loose. And this time I think I've achieved it. I'm quite happy with this result. I'm using the lifting out brush now, and I think it's the eraser tool. Obviously I've not got the eraser full on, and this is working on there's 2 layers with this brown colour on, so it's lifting out the colour on one layer but leaving it on the layer below, so it looks like I'm sort of lifting it out with a wet brush but the colour's still staining the paper, which I thought was quite a nice effect for those sort of branches and tree trunks that are sort of lighter than the background. And I'm using it again now just to add a little bit. And it kind of gives the impression that it's a bit frosty as well. Could almost use this as a Christmas card, I guess. Probably won't though. So I'm still working with all these very light tones, bearing in mind that I am going to put in this really dark this little shrub in the foreground, and I'm going to use the rigger. So I'll switch to the rigger brush for this one. You can see how much darker the colour is. So instantly it looks like it's in front of everything else. So that's the trick that I'm using. I'm keeping everything else really muted and almost greyed off. They are pastel colours. And then I've gone in with this really dark colour for the little sapling that's growing in the foreground. And I flick in a few blades of grass, because obviously it's just sort of floating there. And the trick that I always do here, I've done it forever and ever, as long as I can remember, with watercolours, I will flick these in and then soften off the bottom of it. So I'm using the smudge tool there to just soften off the bottom of the edge. So that's like the same as adding a little bit of water and softening that away. And that gives this really nice effect that it's actually sat in the ground and it's not floating. Another thing I did when I crashed and burned with this painting, I painted the leaves directly onto the twigs that I'd already painted, and they looked like they were stuck on. So what I did with this one, I painted the leaves floating in the air, and then drew some more twigs in, And you'll see, well, so the first one I do, I paint on the end of the twig just to make me out a liar, of course. But that one, you see, I've sort of painted just off the twigs. And they look so much more natural. And I'm painting them all in one colour to start with. Then I add some other colours, some yellows and some darker tones. So I'm kind of painting this sort of typical leaf shapes, really. Keeping it quite very close to my sketch. You notice I didn't put those branches in. Well, I've not put them in yet, and I don't put them in. The branches at the top left of the sketch, I've left them out. I didn't think it needed them. I felt it looked finished, and I think if I'd have put them in, it would have started to get very messy. So you see now I'm putting in these very thin little branches that support the leaves, and I felt that was a lot better than just sort of painting them onto the ends of the twigs. I noticed there I've got one of the twigs that looks a little bit thick. One thing that you have to be aware of course, when you're painting branches and things, that you do actually make them thick enough to support what you're going to hang off them. Quite often it's really easy to make them too spindly and too thin. So I just wanted a few highlights in there. Sort of smudge them out and go over them again and add dark bits and stuff. But this is just really a very, very simple painting using a sketch. And I am very pleased and happy with my final third attempt. And that is it. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I'm just going to sign it there. If you have, a big thumbs up, as always, is much appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, because I have lots of videos like this and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I will see you in the next one. Bye.